It looks like Mitch Marner is on his way out of Toronto. Could he be on his way into Columbus to be the final piece of the rebuild puzzle? We discuss on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team, and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Now, we're going to be talking today about what everyone is talking about, and that is Mitch Marner. He's almost definitely going to hit free agency, right? The question is, where does he go? Does he go to Detroit? Does he go to New York? Does he go to Utah? Does he go to wherever, right? Does he go to the Sharks? Does he stay in Toronto? For me, that's really the only team that I can see him not signing with. Obviously, there's a handful of teams that don't have the cap space, even a little bit, right? They would have to move money around to make it work. But if I can pull up the upcoming cap space right now, which is not super helpful because they haven't flipped it over from last year's yet, but if I can make it work, hey, there we go. So if we assume, for example, that Mitch Marner is not going to sign in Toronto, right? And if we assume that he's probably going to take no less than $12 million, and it'll probably be slightly more because it'll be the free agency tax, right? And it'll be, you only get it unless you manage to do a deal with Toronto to get not a sign and trade necessarily, but in the same way that the Blue Jackets did for Damon Severson a couple of years ago, they threw a third-round pick at New Jersey so they could get that extra year with Severson's contract. Instead of having to sign him to 7 years on July 1st, they traded for him on July 29th or whatever June 29th, whatever it was, to get that extra 8 years to get that extra 8th year in the contract. So if you assume that Mitch Marner is only going to be signing for 7 years, right, he could take $11.5 million for 8 years, or he could take $14 million for 7 years, and that comes out to roughly the same, right? So my guess is no less than $12 million, but it's probably going to be 13 or up, right? Because this is potentially a 100-point player. So if we get rid of teams that don't have at least $13 million in cap space, so that is the Dallas Stars, the St. Louis Blues, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the New York Rangers, the Washington Capitals, the Montreal Canadiens, the Colorado Avalanche, the Edmonton Oilers, the Golden Knights, and the New Jersey Devils. Every other team has at least $13 million. The lowest of the rest of the teams is the Vancouver Canucks, who have 16.5 or 16.75 million dollars in cap space. Obviously, the Blue Jackets are way up there with San Jose. They've got $41 million in cap space. San Jose somehow has $43 million in cap space, which is honestly really, really impressive. But obviously, some of these teams, they've got players to re-sign, they've got got cap space that they have to keep, and Blue Jackets are in on that, right? Is the Blue Jackets have got to keep some cap space for example, an Adam Fantilli contract, right? That's coming up next summer. You've got to pay Voronkov this summer. You need to pay at least 2 more defensemen, whether that ends up being Fabro and or Provorov or not. The Blue Jackets right now have 17 out of 23 players signed to their roster. So they need at least potentially a backup goalie or a starting goalie. They need probably at least a goalie. Maybe. Depending on what they do with Elvis. This is not an Elvis episode, but they need probably, I would say, 4 forwards and 2 defensemen at the minimum. So they can't, that $41 million is not going to spend itself, but also they're not going to spend that whole $41 million, right? My guess is they're going to keep probably 20 of it back. And we've talked about this a little bit on the show. Again, Adam Fantilli needs a new contract. If you can sign him to an 8x10, you do it yesterday, right? But in a couple of years, Cole Sillinger needs a new contract. You got Chinikov is going to need a new contract. Like there's players coming off of their contracts. Like in 3 years' time, Denton Matejchuk is going to need a contract. Kent Johnson's going to need an extension. Kromachenko's going to need an extension. Like, they can't just throw $41 million at free agency this summer. But I have said that if they keep, I think having $20-ish million in cap space seems reasonable, right? If you assume that you don't need to, like, my guess is that the Columbus is not going to spend to the cap next season. I don't think they're a team that's quite ready to spend to the cap. You get teams like, again, going back to the salary cap for this season. Again, now that we're in the playoffs, it's kind of tricky to look at it. But there are teams like, for example, the Tampa Bay Lightning that spend to the cap basically every single year, right? Columbus is probably not going to be one of those this year. They might be in the future. I'm pretty sure that 2019 team was basically spent to the cap, right? Obviously, they brought in Duchesne. They kept the UFAs. Like there was a lot of money on that team. But I could see them. They're going to bring in some like they're going to be paying some money. They're going to be signing some checks on free agency. They have the cap space for Mitch Marner. Obviously, the passing of Johnny Gaudreau has opened up a little bit of cap space that they thought was, okay, well, that's nearly $10 million that they're not going to be able to touch for the next 6 years or 5 years or whatever it was, right? But suddenly that $10 million is opened up. That's not quite Mitch Marner money, but it gets close enough, right? So do they, can they afford it? Yes, that's the question, right? And I know a lot of people are saying, well, why would you give all this money to Mitch Marner when you've got other contracts that are going to be up in a couple of years? And because the cap is going up 20 million over the next 3 seasons, right? It's jumped up about 5 million this summer. It's going to keep jumping up for the next 2 years. I think a lot of people are still vaguely traumatized by the COVID cap, the salary cap that didn't go up for 2-3 years straight. That's not the case here. The cap is going to go up. We're seeing, I think this might be the biggest jump in the cap that I can remember since starting to watch hockey. And Blue Jackets might as well spend some of it, right? They're going to have to spend some of it to get to the floor. But even more than that, I think, if you could get a guy like Mitch Marner, how often do guys like him reach free agency, right? The last guy was Johnny Gaudreau. I know everyone gets excited every time a big player gets to around about now-ish without a new contract. There was a lot of talk about, Austin Matthews constantly gets talked about as, oh, what if he doesn't sign in long-term in Toronto? There was William Nylander, again, to go back to Toronto. Leon Draisaitl was talked about all of last summer before he signed the contract extension, right? I'm sure we're going to spend all of next season talking about Connor McDavid. Depending on what happens in this playoffs, is Connor McDavid going somewhere else? There are always going to be these conversations, and right now the conversations being had is Mitch Marner. So that's just to kind of to lay out the basic numbers, right? The Blue Jackets can afford to throw a lot of money at Mitch Marner, more so than I would say basically every other team, right? They've got a lot of their guys not locked up, but they don't have a lot of big contracts coming up this year or next. Really, Adam Fantilli is the only big contract coming up. And again, you get if you give him 8x10, you do that and you're well in, right? Then you've still got 31 million to play with. Plus, the cap is going up by about another 7 million next summer anyway. So there is. I was going to say there's no way to do free agency badly, but obviously there is a way to do free agency badly, and it's to give a bad player a lot of money. But giving Mitch Marner a lot of money is going to age well for whoever does it, right? But the question is, should that be Columbus? And there are a lot of positives. There are some negatives. There are some negatives that I feel are kind of overblown, let's say, or a little bit dramatic, and we're going to talk about the playoffs we're going to talk about how he doesn't perform in the playoffs. We'll do that a little bit later, but I want to take a quick break, and then I want to talk about what Mitch Marner could bring to the Columbus Blue Jackets, because it is a lot of things, right? So we're going to take a quick break, and then when we get back, we will do exactly that here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First of all, though, I've got to tell you about Wonderful Pistachios. You're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. They are one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller for longer. I love the no shells variety. It is the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. I had a whole pack of them on Monday when I was stuck on a train, because I'm a gremlin, and if I open a bag of pistachios, you better believe I'm going to eat the entire bag. And Wonderful Pistachios are so good and so easy for that. If you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, though, the in-shell options are also a classic favorite. Whether you're running between meetings or dropping off the kids, Wonderful Pistachios are the snack that works as hard as you do. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. We're going to talk about the good for Mitch Marner, like the pros here, because there are a fair amount of them. And the first one is not like rocket science. This season, Mitch Marner had 102 points. The Blue Jackets' leading scorer this season was Kirill Marchenko. No, that's a lie. Was Zach Werenski, who had, I believe, 84 points. Am I making that up? I really should have pulled this up beforehand, but hey, it wouldn't be a Locked On Blue Jackets episode if I didn't have to pull up NHL.com/stats on the fly. The point I'm making here while I look this up is Mitch Marner would have comfortably led this team in scoring by a not insignificant amount, right? It was Zach Werenski with 82 points. There we go. I did it. Hurrah. Mitch Marner had 20 more points than Werenski. You go to last season, again, like Mitch Marner had 85 points in 69 games for the Leafs. The leader for the Blue Jackets was Johnny Gaudreau with 60 points in 81 games. Season before that, 99 points for the Leafs. Blue Jackets leading scorer, Johnny Gaudreau with 74 points. You can see the pattern that's developing here, right? Mitch Marner would have led this team in scoring by about, what did I say? 20 to 25 points each of the last 3 seasons. Go back to 21-22, 97 points in 72 games. Blue Jackets leading scorer, Jacob Voracek, with 62 points in 79 games. Mitch Marner is an elite playmaking winger. Even though, and again, I want to reiterate, he is an elite winger, and he still has, he scored almost 30 goals this season. His lowest total for goal scoring is 16, that he had in the 2019-2020 season, which he played 59 games of, because that was the year that stopped very suddenly due to COVID, right? Before that, his rookie season, he had 19 goals. Mitch Marner is good for 20, potentially 30 goals a season. He's hit the 30-goal mark twice, in 21-22 and then 22-23. His career high is 35 goals, which again would have beat everyone on the Blue Jackets. That was the 21-22 season, where the leading scorer was, I believe, Oliver Bjorkstrand with 28 goals. So he would have had 7 more goals than the leading scorer on the Blue Jackets. Obviously, he's had a couple of I want to say down years, but even his down years are still pretty darn good, right? Second season, he had 69 points in 82 games. The first 2 seasons in the league are the only 2 that he has been fewer than a point a game, right? He is an elite winger. He assists a lot more than he scores, which I think, again, when we get into the playoffs bit, people really freak out about how he doesn't score in the playoffs, but I'm not looking to Mitch Marner to score in the playoffs, right? If he does, great. But the other thing about Mitch Marner is that he is elite defensively as well, right? he is not only a very, very good offensive player that, again, has a 100-point season this year and got real close a couple of years ago, had 99 points, 97 points before that, has a 94-point season under his belt as well. Like, he should be in the conversation for the Selkie basically every season. He is extremely good defensively. He is extremely good on the penalty kill. Like, here's the thing. The Blue Jackets need to get better defensively, and I talked about this with Jeff Svoboda, like, early last week, was getting better defensively doesn't, like, it starts with the 6 guys on the blue line, but if your forwards aren't good defensively, like, you're just going to be fighting an uphill battle, right? Mitch Marner can be a difference maker for the Blue Jackets in basically every single zone. Like, he's just so good. And I know that he gets a lot of flack for being soft and not being there in the playoffs. And again, we'll talk about the playoffs in a minute, but like, Mitch Marner immediately becomes the best winger on this team. And that is no shade to like Kromachenko, who had an extremely good season this season. Mitch Marner is just, that's a 4th overall pick, playing like a 4th overall pick, right? He is extremely, extremely, extremely good. People who say that they don't want him on their team, like, I'm sure they have good reasons for it, but like, I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't want Mitch Marner on this team. You know, the only thing that would maybe give me pause is what is his attitude like, right? And that's something that I don't think we know. I know that, again, there's a lot of Twitter journalists, a lot of Twitter GMs that know exactly what Mitch Marner is like in the room, and you know, it's I don't know, and unless it comes out that, you know, someone reliable is saying, hey, Mitch Marner is a whiny, entitled baby that is terrible in the room, I'm like, people on Twitter can say that till the cows come home, and I'm not going to believe them, right? If, I don't know, Elliot Friedman comes out and says that there are questions that Mitch Marner's character is lacking, then I have my issues with Elliot Friedman, but I'm probably going to believe him if he says that, right? And he's simply not saying that. So I think a lot of it is, you know, Mitch Marner to me feels like Kent Johnson, but more, right? They have very, very similar games. Both extremely good playmakers. Mitch Marner obviously has been around a little bit longer, but if you can turn Kent Johnson into a Mitch Marner, and one of the arguments that I saw while I don't remember where I was. I might have been on Reddit, which that was my mistake, you know, like that's on me. But I saw someone say that you don't need Mitch Marner because you have Kent Johnson, and it does feel a little bit like saying, no, I don't want one cake. Like, I don't want another cake. I already have one. You can have 2 cakes. You can have 2 elite wingers. You can have more than one, like, elite playmaker. If Kent Johnson turns into Mitch Marner, incredible. Now you've got 2 Mitch Marners. Saying no to Mitch Marner just because you have Kent Johnson feels to me like it feels kind of short-sighted, right? I don't know. I don't think there's any world in which Mitch Marner makes this team worse, right? And we'll talk about the playoffs in a second, but for me, anyway, you're looking for another winger for Adam Fantilli, right? And whether that winger ends up being Gavin Brindley down the line, whether it ends up being, you know, Caden Lindstrom, who might play center, who might play wing, you know, whether it ends up being someone else entirely. You can't sit here and tell me that Mitch Marner would not immediately become, like, you put Mitch Marner, Adam Fantilli, and Kent Johnson out there, and, like, that to me feels like you're just going to get Adam Fantilli leveling up even faster than he leveled up this season, right? Or you put him on that line with Kromachenko and Sean Monahan, and you watch Kromachenko score 50 goals, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that all of Auston Matthews' success is attributed to Mitch Marner, but I do think that they make each other better, right? So obviously, if you're good at passing the puck and you play with a guy that is good at scoring, you're going to pass the puck to him and he's going to score, right? So if you put Mitch Marner with someone who knows how to score, it's gonna bump both of their stats, right? And again, I'm not comparing Kromachenko to Auston Matthews because I think Auston Matthews is genuinely a generational goal scorer, you know. But Koromachenko is a very, very good goal scorer. And I think if you give him another winger like Mitch Marner, you get Sean Monahan in the middle to just kind of keep things running, like, you know, be in charge, be the adult on the line. That to me feels like huge success, right? Doesn't matter who you play him with. Like, you either put him with Fantilli or you put him with Marchenko. To me, those are the two most important Blue Jackets that you need to find players for, right? Because the Blue Jackets, they have the duo, they have the Monahan-Marchenko duo, they have the Fantilli-Johnson duo. To me, that's where you start. You've got to find left wings, or you've got to find any wing to play on the other side of them, right? And to me, Mitch Marner is the best winger available. If he shoots you down, you know, obviously the Blue Jackets offer sheeted him a few years ago, and he did not sign it, presumably because Columbus was kind of a miserable place to play at that point. But I wonder if things are different now. You know, he is looking to. I think he's looking to leave Toronto. I think Columbus is slowly becoming quite a desirable location because it's, hey, great city. It is very low key. You know, if hey Mitch, if you're tired of like the bright lights of the Toronto media, like, do you want to go to Columbus where you can wander down the high street and not be recognized ever? Like, I'm just saying there are pros to living in a small market, and I think the situation for both the player and the team has changed enough that I think he said no last time. He might not say no this time. It just depends on if Don Waddell if Don Waddell feels like he can give Mitch Marner the bajillion dollars that Mitch Marner is probably going to command on the market. So the good news is the Blue Jackets can outbid basically anyone. It's just a case of can you get Mitch Marner to sign on the dotted line. But I want to talk about the elephant in the room, the potential red flag, and that is Mitch Marner's playoff performance, because I'm going to do something that I don't think is allowed here when I come back from a break, and that is use nuance to discuss the Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs. And we'll do that in just a second. Here on Locked On Blue Jackets. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's discuss Mitch Marner in the playoffs, because you hear it every single spring. The Leafs don't know how to win in the playoffs because the core four are soft and useless. And the core four is, for people who don't know this, and I assume that everyone does, but just in case, this is your first day paying attention to hockey: Auston Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, John Tavares. That's your core four. That's the guys you pay the big bucks to. And there has been this reputation following Marner around for a while as he doesn't show up in the playoffs. Now, on the surface, I see a lot of people point just strictly to his points generation, right? Like, he has 63 playoff points in 70 playoff games. He has 13 goals and 50 assists. In these playoffs that he's just been knocked out of, he's got 13 points in 13 games. Now, I don't know if that is leading the team, but I suspect it would be pretty close if it's not. Let's see if I can pull the playoff stats up real quick. Okay, he was second on the team in playoff points. William Nylander had 6 goals, 9 assists for 15 points. Marner had 2 goals and 11 assists. And I think this is what gets people kind of bent out of shape. And I'm not saying that there's not, sometimes there is, where there's smoke, there's fire, right? I'm not saying that there's no smoke here. Mitch Marner doesn't score a bunch of goals. He doesn't score a lot of goals proportional to his assists, right? So I think a lot of people are like, well, he's only got 2 goals in 13 games. Is he doing anything? And the answer is yes. He's passing the puck. Of the however many goals that this team scored in the playoffs, which, hey, I can pull that up as well. The Toronto Maple Leafs scored 36 goals in the playoffs in their 13 games. Mitch Marner, with his 13 points, was involved in just over a third of the goals that the Leafs scored, and they scored the 3rd most goals of any team so far. Obviously, teams will go on to score more, but it's the end of the 2nd round. The 3rd round hasn't started yet, but the only teams that outscored the Maple Leafs are the Florida Panthers, who just eliminated the Maple Leafs, and the Edmonton Oilers. The problem with the Toronto Maple Leafs was the goaltending and the defense wasn't good enough, which again, I feel like we do this every year where we yell at Toronto for not being good enough offensively, when in reality, it's the fact that they don't, like, the defense the defense was much improved this season, in fairness, and their goaltending was much improved this season. But if you're going to get outscored, like, it's tough to win games, you know? And they got outscored, what was it, 36-42, I think it was? Yeah, you know? And Mitch Marner, again, involved in just over a third of those goals. So on the surface, I'm like, and when I looked this up, I was like, no, what are you talking about? He's consistently one of the better forwards in terms of playoff scoring. And then I decided to look a little bit deeper. And so for the purposes of this, I went through and I took his stats for, I'm calling it the first half of a playoff series. And if you're watching on the YouTube, you can see my air quotes there. But for games 1 to 4, where it's impossible to be eliminated, I've taken his stats there. And I've taken his stats for games 5, 6, and 7 if needed. So for the last 11 playoff series, they've gone to round 2 twice. Technically, they haven't hit round 1 of those times because one of those was the play-in series that they lost against Columbus to. But in the first half of the series, so games 1 to 4 or games 1 to 3 for that play-in series, Mitch Marner has played 43 games and has 12 goals and 36 assists for 48 points. In the second half, or games 5 through 7, which, in fairness, they lost in 6, lost in 7, lost in 7, lost in 5. That was the play-in series, so essentially game 7. Lost in 7, lost in 7, 1 in 6, lost in 5, lost in 7, 1 in 6, lost in 7. So again, there's a lot of numbers that I'm throwing at you here, but basically what I'm saying here is, in the quote-unquote second half of the playoff series, which is actually only 27 games, so like 2/3 of the first half of the series, he has 1 goal and 13 assists. Now, that is about, like, the production is a little bit under in terms of assists. So in the first 43 games of a series, he has 36 assists. In the second 27 games, he has 13 assists, so about a third. So the scoring, yes, is down, but he's playing fewer games. I didn't do the math on the percentage of this because that's simply not math that I can do with the migraine that I've been fighting off all day. But here's what I think people are really getting stuck on is, in the first 43 games of the series, he has 12 goals. In the second half, in the 27 games of games 5 through 7, if necessary, he has 1 goal. That, I think, is what's getting people stuck on. And I see a lot of people being like, well, he's got 0 goals in however many elimination games that they've played. I don't think all 27 of those games were elimination games. Or if they were, like they lost in 5 games to the Panthers in 22-23, right? So games, 4 and 5 were elimination games. But then, you look at games that they've won in 7 or games that they've lost in 7, like sometimes elimination. I think the game 7 against the Panthers this year was their only elimination game that they played. Now, in fairness, Mitch Marner had 0.0 assists and had that nightmare giveaway that has been replayed on, I assume, every TV in Toronto a million times since that game happened. But there is a definite difference between the points that he puts up in elimination games versus the points that or quote-unquote elimination games, versus the points that he puts up at the beginning of the series. Now, yes, there is something to be said for this, that he does perform worse the longer a series goes on. However, I do think that some of that onus is that there are many series here that should have never gone to 7 games. Like they were up 2-0 on the Panthers this series. I know that we have it was 3-1, which I believe was all the way back in 2013. But like I believe it was 3-1 against the Canadiens in 2021. I believe it was 3-1 against the Bruins in either 17-18 or 18-19. I don't remember which one. Like, they have let these series slip away from them, and I think it's unfair to point at Mitch Marner for disappearing when clearly no one is showing up, right? And And the other thing as well is that there is a lot of blame specifically on Mitch Marner, but I would be really interested too, and I didn't look this up because, again, I simply did not have the time to pay this much attention to Austin Matthews right now. If you play on a line with, Austin Matthews, you're gonna pass him the puck basically every chance you get, right? He's the best goal scorer on the team, or one of the best goal scorers on the team. He's been playing injured basically all season, which is a completely different level of stupid and selfish and whatnot that we won't get into right now. But if Austin Matthews isn't scoring, what's Mitch Marner supposed to do, right? And I would love to know, and I don't know if this is a stat that is available anywhere, but I would love to know how many passes from Marner to Matthews should have ended in goals had Matthews scored them, right? And again, I don't know if that's I know that, I know just enough about advanced stats to make me dangerous, but I don't know if there are playoff stats out there that will track like that kind of thing, right? I will say that of the playoff players right now, that Austin Matthews was third in the playoffs with an expected goals. He had 6 expected goals. He actually scored 3 goals. So he scored 3 goals fewer than he was expected to, right? I don't know if if I can find where the expected goals has gone. I had a stat pulled up that was like how much offense Mitch Marner is creating, basically. And I do know that Hockey Stat Cards has, again, some really fun cards that they pull up, which basically says who created the most offense, who created the most defense, who did this, that, and the other, right? And frequently, Mitch Marner is at the very top of these of these stat cards. Basically, what it does is it tracks your individual offense. It tracks how much offense above average the team has while you're on the ice. Same for the power play, individual defense, how good the team defense is when you're on the ice, penalty kill, and then it basically spits out a number that is game score, which is again, I don't understand all of it, but I do like to look at it. And Mitch Marner consistently ranks in the top half of these charts or near the top 4 for the Leafs, right? So I do genuinely think that a lot of this, I was going to say drama, but I don't know that drama is quite the right word. All of this discourse, let's say, about Marner not being a playoff performer, I think, yeah, probably he is a little bit to blame for that. But I think it's also a team thing. I don't think it's fair to blame him entirely. And I also think that it is fair to look and say, well, if it turns out that Austin Matthews has been playing with, like, he got his hand cut off in October and has been playing with a wooden hand all season, then he's probably not going to be scoring a lot of goals, which means that a lot of Mitch Marner's passes, which I'm assuming are still, of the same caliber, if suddenly the goal scoring dries up, then what's Marner supposed to do about that, right? He's just going to keep passing the puck. He's not a goal scorer. And I think people get kind of bent out of shape when players aren't scoring specifically. And again, he's got what were the numbers? In the second half of playoff series, he's got 1 goal in 27 games. Like, yeah, people get twitchy about that. He's got 14 points in those 27 games. Yes, there is a disparity. 48 points in the first 43 games for the first half of the series. 14 points in the 27 games for the second half of the series. Like, it's not his production has been cut in half, but it's his production has been cut probably by 40%, give or take. Again, I simply cannot do that math on the fly, and you can't make me. The short version of this argument is, yes, he is not yes, his performance does slip in the second half of a series, but I don't think it's all on him. And I also think that to kind of this is maybe a different thought entirely, but Sergei Bobrovsky was a known playoff choker, right? As much as I, and I don't necessarily think this is true, but Sergei Bobrovsky struggled in the playoffs right up until he didn't, right? He went to Florida. He had a 1 week season in Florida, I think, like his first season there, and then he took off, right? And he arguably could have won the Conn Smythe last season. If you ask me anyway. Do I unfairly bias myself towards goalies? Maybe. Am I sorry about that? No. But who's to say that Mitch Marner won't go somewhere else where there is less pressure and, suddenly and a switch will just flip, right? And he'll realize, oh, actually, I can keep doing this in games, 5, 6, and 7 if necessary. Do I think it's going to be Columbus? I don't think it will be. But I would be more than happy if Mitch Marner came here. The other thing also is, he chokes in the playoffs. Well, you know what would be great? Getting to the playoffs, right? Mitch Marner is a player that will help you get to the playoffs. Figure it out from there, right? That's kind of that's my overarching thesis is Mitch Marner makes this team better. You can figure the playoffs out. This team is built differently to the Maple Leafs. And I'm not going to say whether if it's built better or worse or whatever, but I think the atmosphere around the team is different. I think the team itself is different. And I am going to be, regardless of where Mitch Marner signs this offseason, I'm going to be really interested to see how he does in the playoffs going forward on literally any other team than Toronto. And that's kind of all I've got for today. We'll be back tomorrow with a brand new episode of Locked On Blue Jackets. We'll probably take another look at a potential free agent that the Blue Jackets should pick up or could pick up. Whether they should or not, like how likely it is, all of that good stuff. That's coming up tomorrow. You can find me on Twitter. I've been Jay Foster. You can find me at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening, for making it your first listen of the day every single day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow with a fresh new episode. But until then, make sure you stay locked on.